Okay, happy Monday, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. We're doing the usual weekly Q&A. Before I get into the 5 questions we have this week, I will just quick update on community events. We did do the executive meetup last Friday, so great to catch up with everybody who was able to come. We have another one this Friday. I'm actually traveling, but again, if you just want to catch up with some fellow tech leaders who are all working on their career, but we also talk about all sorts of other stuff. We got into the usual kind of AI discussion last Friday, which was great. But if you have time, feel free to show up. And then we do have on the 23rd, we have our book club doing Inner Excellence. So that's the next sort of more topic-driven event on the 23rd. So please come to that if you can. Okay. So these questions are the ones for this week. So as usual, I'll go through kind of in order from the blueprint. First one is around your offer. Specifically, does the order of my bullets matter on my resume? And the answer is, as you might suspect, like, yes, it does, right? And so the idea is it isn't hugely important. Obviously, your sort of your title, your value proposition, that stuff is more important. But the question is, which of the bullets are most effective for this role that you're applying for? So if you have, again, 5, 6, 7 bullets in your top job, you want to sort them based on two things. One is the value of the bullet. So your first bullet should be kind of an information bullet, right? We talked about this before. If you look at all the resume stuff in the community, you'll see this, right? We want value, right? Did you, in the best case, grow revenue, save money, make things faster? Like, what did you do? The better the value, the higher up it should go. So again, if you've made money or saved material amounts of money, those should be the first bullets. Made something more efficient, that should be the second bullet. Or third bullet. And then if you've sort of done things informationally, you built a new onboarding program that trained a class of new people coming in. That's useful, but that's not really an outcome. That's not really a value. So those go lower. So that's the one sort you should do, is based on sort of the value hierarchy. Higher value, higher position in your bullets. The other sort is based on the actual job you're going for, right? So there you want to say, like, maybe your third bullet is, in the value hierarchy, it's the third one, but it talks about very specifically the thing that they're very interested in this job you're applying for. If it is a distinct match and it is still a strong bullet, you can move that up to the top, right? So value-based hierarchy. And then second one is if you're applying to something and one of your lower bullets is actually more valuable, you want to move that up. The underlying reason for this is because people get bored and they have a stack of 10 resumes, or they're super busy, or whatever. But bottom line is they just won't read all your bullets. So if you have an amazing bullet that's number 5, 6, or 7, 90% of people will never see it. A small percentage of people will read your resume line by line, but most people won't see it. They will look at the first bullet, maybe the first and second, maybe the first, second, third. So as always, you have a very limited amount of time and space. So you want to make sure those are the most effective. So yes, you should think about the order of your bullets, particularly in that first job, because same rationale. That the first job on your resume is basically what I'm going to hire you for. Am I interested in what you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Like vaguely as background, but really I'm hiring you based on your current role, because that's presumably the best one and the most sophisticated, et cetera. So that's the one you should spend the most time looking at. All right, so that's about offer. Next one around leads. And this is something, again, someone sort of wrote, like, I'm hearing there are lots of fake jobs on LinkedIn, right? Is that true? And unfortunately, I mean, are there a lot? I mean, there are a lot. As a percentage, I'm not sure as a percentage, but it is a challenge, right? So there absolutely are fake jobs on LinkedIn, like jobs that they're not even posted. And I told a story this to somebody else where I was helping my daughter try to find jobs, and there was like a Microsoft junior analyst job that looked interesting, but it wasn't Microsoft, right? If you looked at it, it was clearly a fake job, right? But it overall looks great, but you have to be very specific and double check it. So there are fake jobs, not a ton of them percentage wise, but there are. So you have to keep that in mind. The other thing that is probably more what people are talking about these days is the fact that jobs get posted and then either they never hire, or that job goes down and then they kind of repost it again. And oftentimes that has, one of two things. One is there's an internal candidate, right? Because in a lot of companies, whether, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but like whether it's legally required, because we used to do this in some of my old companies, like you have to post. Even if I know I'm going to, sort of promote you or you're my target candidate, I have to post it to make sure it's open and, sort of probably avoiding legal liability, right? To say somehow the jobs are closed. So you post it, you allow people to do it. Oftentimes it's posted outside for a week or so. but you don't really need to post it outside, but the process says you need to. So there are a set of jobs that are already targeted. They go out there just because the quote unquote process internally in the company says they must be posted externally, just in case there's an amazing candidate, which oftentimes there won't be, and they'll go with the internal one. So there is a whole set of internals, which goes to the networking point, which is a separate discussion. But yes, there are things that are being posted there. And then just because of the uncertainty in the market and the economy and all that kind of stuff, there is a lot of jobs that are posted, then put on hold. And it's all like internal budget discussions, right? Are we going to do this thing or we're not going to do this thing? I got it posted, but then there's this rule that says, no, all hires are frozen. So there's a lot of that noise going on. So in general, just double check that it's a real job. Be aware that a lot of these are sort of pre-filled. So that's why, percentage wise, it's just low, right? You're going to apply to 10 jobs. A few of them are just going to be really non-contenders, which is why you need more. The other thing, just again, to be super safe, and it's actually a good practice anyways, is apply on the company website. So don't use LinkedIn to apply. I know it's easier, so you got to balance it. But if you apply through the website of the company that you're targeting, a couple things happen, right? One is, it's a real job because it's on the website, right? It's not posted through LinkedIn, which could be fake. But two, and again, how much this affects it, I don't know, but you are applying directly in their system, which means you're capturing exactly as you want. You're not worried about the translation. And they know that you went to the website, right? And so they know that you went direct, which again, if you're using filters, like if you have a couple hundred, oftentimes they'll use that as a filter to say, well, at least let's get everybody who took the time and energy to go apply, as opposed to the spam applies that you often get in LinkedIn, right? So in terms of applying to sort of combat the quote unquote fake job problem, I always recommend just go to the company website, apply directly. Okay. Number 3, in sales. So this is now interviews, right? Can I ask about next steps at the end of the interview? Yes, right? And you generally should. So what are the next steps from here? Right? These are great closing questions if they don't tell you. So thank you for your time. Any last questions, et cetera. And at the end, you can absolutely say, like, I really enjoyed talking to you. This is very helpful for me, and I hope I was able to demonstrate my interest and my capabilities for this job. Like, always put some pitch in there, and then you can ask, and so what are the next steps at this point? And typically it'll be like, oh, we'll review stuff and we'll get back to you in a few days, right? If you have a recruiter that you're working with, then you can always send a kind of thank you note and then send something specific to them. But you should ask because people wonder because you don't want to be overeager, you don't want to seem too pushy. But being professional about it, asking, because oftentimes they won't tell you, they'll just forget or they just won't. And then, should you ask, should you not ask? So asking, I think, and again, it's just opinion, but I think is a good idea. And to say, so what are the next steps in the process at this point? Just professional, I'm not saying I got it. I'm not saying I didn't get it. I'm just interested in what the process is. That is usually a very safe question. And I would recommend that you go ahead and ask it. Okay, switching over to the executive presence side of the world. So here's a question that says, how much financial information should I know? Right. And so if you remember from the blueprint and you remember the presence, like we're trying to up our value, we're trying to talk about the things that senior executives talk about. One of them is financials, right? So you need to understand the financials because that is the lens that all of these senior executives use to make decisions, right? So anytime there's a project, an opportunity, a reorg, whatever it is looked at through the lens often of, ROI. How much am I investing in this thing? How much is it going to cost me to do this thing? What do I expect as a return? Right? And understanding the priorities of the executives is all about the numbers and then the relative number, right? And this is an important concept, right? So if you have a budget of $1 million, right, and I have a $100,000 proposal, that is 10% of your budget, right? Which is material, right? If you have $1 million budget, and you ask me for $1,000 to, buy something, go to training, if I'm $1 million budget, I'll probably be like, yeah, go ahead, no problem. Because $1,000 is not even a rounding error, right? At $1 million budget. And so boss, maybe 10 million, boss's boss, 100 million, CEO, billion, depending obviously on the scale of your company. But you want to think about, is this thing material? And if so, to whom? So I have a project. I came up with it. I think it's great. It's going to add tons of value. It's going to cost $500,000. Does my boss care? Probably. Does my boss's boss care? Right? And on and on and on. And so if you're in a $1 billion company and you have a $500,000 project, you are not on the CEO's radar. So you don't have to worry about that. right? But are you on the radar of your boss, boss? Like there are people who care, and then there's a layer that stops to care because the numbers are just not big enough, right? On the flip side, if you have, too big a project, you're going to get too many layers in, and then you're competing against everybody else who's kind of at that one. So you want to know how big is your company budget, how big is your budget, your boss's budget, and your boss's budget. So that's usually what I recommend. It's consistent in terms of networking and relationships, all that stuff. It's kind of two levels above you. You should know the one level above. That's pretty much default. The bonus is two levels because most people won't go there, and that helps differentiate you. You can go three, but that's truly above and beyond, right? But the most useful ones are sort of your boss and your boss's boss. So you should know the financials around those units. Now that is expense, but also if you're in the product world, also, wherever you are, you want to know the other half. So if you work on a product, right, you should know the P&L of that product. How much money do we make on that product? What is the annual revenue? What is the total expenses? And what is the profit? And then, you do different math. What is the margin as a percentage of revenue? Like what is the profit, right? And so those are basic numbers that you want to know, again, for your specific function, your boss's function, and your boss's function. If you don't know those things, go find them out. Easiest way to find them out is go meet somebody in finance. Most companies, if you have a budget, you will have a financial controller. That person has access to most of the financials. So you can just say, hey, I know we've been working on my product expenses, but I'd love to see the overall P&L for this product. Can you share that with me? And generally they'll have it, and then they can walk you through it, and you should learn that. So in general, you need to know what matters. How big a number will catch the attention of what set of executives going up the chain? So you should know the scale of your company and how you sit in there. And then you should know all the major financial numbers, again, whether it's expense, revenue, margin, etc. Expense, you can look at capital and operating, like all that kind of. So basically, the top 10 to 20 numbers you should know for yourself, your boss organization, and your boss's boss organization. So that would be the default and kind of the minimum I would say that you need to know in order to be able to have intelligent conversations around financials. If you are going to be meeting senior executives like a CEO or stuff like that, then you can start from the top down and say, what is the biggest, revenue product line? Where's all our profit comes from? Do they come from a few large clients, or is it spread out? Like understanding the macro finances of a business is also very helpful if you're going to be talking to senior executives. So that's the other half of it. But know your financials. It's just one of those things that you need to know if you're going to be a successful executive. Okay. And then one last question. This is around executive results, right? How do I get my team to take on more responsibility? This is a classic problem, right? As you're going through this executive transition, you have more and more on your plate. You're trying to do it to the level that you've done it in the past, which is usually a very high level, high quality, and you're running out of time and you're working too hard and you don't know how to balance it. Like this is a classic problem that I see when I work with clients, right? And so how do you get your team to delegate? There are many different ways, but just today I'll give you one, right? Which is it's actually two. So one is your job as an executive is to define the direction and the outcome, and then make sure everybody has the resources that they need, right? And so when you give your staff an assignment, you want to delegate the outcome and the expectations. All right, here's what we want, and then here are the boundaries in which you should operate. Here's the amount of money you have. Should you or should you not go direct to these functions? Right? You want to be clear about what they're allowed to do and if there's anything they're not allowed to do. Because, okay, we want to bring in a new piece of software to do function X, Y, and Z. I already got the budget approved. We have, $200,000. You can have a team of 3 or 4 people. Here's what you've got. And then here's, again, boundaries. Okay, we're going to need to get security involved. Do I want you to do that, or is that sensitive and so I need to do that? So I can say, well, go talk to procurement, do the RFP, go get all the bids, whatever. When you're going to hit with security, give me a heads up because I'm trying to do something else and I want to be involved, right? But you want to give them the outcome you want and basically the boundaries in which they can operate, right? Which means, should they just do it all? Or are there certain things you want to be involved in, right? Because now you're clarifying, if you do this, get me involved. If you're doing that, just go. I don't need to be involved, right? So you're giving them that. And then the other side of it is when they communicate to you, you want them to effectively do the thinking before they get to you, right? Pre-digest it. Think about the communication. So not, hey, Drew, what do you think about this? Right? And again, I used to do this where I'd be like, okay, let's use that as an example. Don't send me that kind of email, just to be blunt. Don't send me, what do you think about this? I want to know what you think and what my options are, and then I will opine. So when you send me an email with that needs a decision, it should be in this form. And oftentimes I would say, here is an example of the form. So here's the decision. We need to make a event call on this product. All right. Here are the three options. I recommend option A. What do you think, Drew? So I want to see the options that you considered. Sometimes brief pros and cons, but we have option A, option B, option C. And then I want to know which one that you would do if you had to make this decision, right? And by doing that, you're basically getting them to pre-digest it. Because oftentimes they're like, hey, Drew, what do you think we should do? It's very easy for teams to ask you to do that. And your job is to get out of that business, right? You are trying to empower them. You are trying to get them to take ownership of these decisions because you need to spend your time doing new things that require different focuses. And so you want to get them to pre-digest. One of the easiest ways to do that is actually to tell them, when you come to me for, if you need information, be explicit and you explain what you mean. How do I get this? Hey, can you give me an update on what's going on with HR? It's a very vague request, right? As opposed to, I'm trying to find out when can we get this rec approved or whatever. So be specific when you ask me, if I'm the boss, right, for questions, for information. If you need me to make a decision, here's the structure I would like you to use to ask me for a decision. And again, I gave that example of with options and your opinion, but you can do whatever makes sense for you, right? But make them do the thinking before they come directly to you. That's the easiest way. And then you can go, okay, now you're getting better at this. I'm going to let you have more, which goes back to the expectations. Well, now you can go to security because we've gotten on the same page. I understand how you think. And okay, you can negotiate with security on this product because I've trained and we've aligned ourselves so that I'm now confident, right? But that's exactly what you want to do. You want to get out of the day-to-day because you have a lot of work to do if you're going to try to grow your executive career. You want to spend it focused up here, not on the operational things. Okay, so those are the questions for this week. As always, drop another question under this when we post it, or send me a DM, and we'll do this again next week. So hope everybody has a great week, and we will talk to you soon. All right, take care.